Back in 2019, the New Orleans Pelicans had just a 6% chance of landing the #1 overall draft pick. And when they struck gold, it wasn't just the organization celebrating. The entire city of New Orleans erupted with joy as they welcomed the player they believed would be the future of the franchise.
New Orleans Pelicans select Zion.
This man had the quickness and skill set of a guard paired with the size and strength of a center, and was being called the second coming of Shaquille O'Neal. Zion Williamson wasn't just a prospect, he was the prospect of the decade.
How high can you go?
Fast forward nearly 6 years, and this is how people feel about him.
But this is embarrassing. The man eating himself out of a job.
He hasn't shown that he's disciplined enough to take care of himself physically yet.
He is stealing money. He is stealing money.
What happened? Why does Zion Williamson represent everything that's wrong with the NBA? And the million-dollar question, what can be done about this troubling trend?
You look at Zion Williamson right now, it's becoming a joke. And we know that this brother's got...
NBA fans have been losing interest in the league for a while now, and they haven't been shy about expressing their frustration online.
I've watched a lot of basketball, and the NBA, man, it just sucks.
The numbers tell the same story. Viewership is down, and the disconnect is real. One major reason is the "I don't care about winning" attitude that's creeping into the league. Fans can feel it, and it's turning them off.
I don't like the NBA.
Why not the NBA?
Don't give a f.
In a recent interview, All-Star Bradley Beal even stated that many younger players seem more focused on their paychecks than on winning.
When is the 1st and 15? Like, you walk into the building ready to lose.
This video is mainly focused on Zion Williamson, but the truth is, he's far from being the only example of a player who doesn't seem to care about winning anymore. There are plenty more players I could talk about, but when you look at Zion's career so far, from 2019 until today, the man represents everything fans are frustrated with in today's NBA players. Here's a prime example of what I mean. Klay Thompson suffered a devastating knee injury in 2019, only to face another brutal setback when he tore his Achilles during a pickup game. These are injuries severe enough to end careers. Yet, Klay made his comeback in 2022 at 31 years old, and since then, he's played in 214 games. Zion Williamson, on the other hand, now 24, entered the league in 2019 as a highly regarded 19-year-old rookie. Yet, to date, he's played in just 193 games. That's crazy. For a young player drafted at 19 to log fewer games than a seasoned veteran after he battled back from 2 devastating leg injuries.
I mean, Ocho, the guy's missed 190 games in 5 seasons. 190 games?
Now, if Zion were doing everything in his power to stay healthy but still struggled with injuries, like Derrick Rose, who pushed his body to its limits during his MVP caliber days and ended up wrecking his knees, or Brandon Roy, whose career was derailed by a degenerative knee condition, it would be a completely different story. But Zion's injuries have largely been a result of his weight issues, a problem rooted in his inability to control his eating habits.
Is it hard to diet at your age?
Sheesh.
Be honest.
Since it's you, I'll be real. There are times when I will say that, man, that shit hard. It's hard, man. Like,
the man literally cares more about eating than he does the NBA. Things got so out of control with Zion's eating habits that the Pelicans had to include a weight clause in his contract. Let that sink in for a moment. In 20 years of watching the NBA, I've never heard of a team needing to impose weight conditions on a player's contract. Sure, the Miami Heat famously required all their players to maintain 8% body fat or less, but that's for the entire team, not a specific player, let alone the one expected to be the cornerstone of their franchise. This reflects a troubling trend in the NBA. where some players seem to lack accountability. Win or lose, they're still pocketing millions.
If they win 5 games in a row and he averages 35 points a game, how much does he get?
Same money.
$500,000. If they lose 5 games in a row and he's a bum every single game, how much does he get?
$500,000.
Let's use Zion as an example again. He's earning $36 million this season, yet out of 42 possible games, he's only suited up for 9. And here's where it gets even more ridiculous. Out of those 9 games, he's won just 3. The man has pocketed roughly $18 million, essentially half a season's salary, to win 3 lousy games.
He is stealing money. He is stealing money.
Zion recently returned from injury and pulled off an impressive 360-degree windmill dunk. It was a highlight moment for sure, but fans couldn't help but feel frustration. You see, time and time again, when stars face heavy criticism, they respond with a standout performance or release flashy off-season practice highlights to tease the fans and regain goodwill from both the fans and the organization. But this time, people weren't falling for it. They'd seen this act before. Not falling for this again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And then there's this comment that perfectly sums up Zion's 6-year career so far. We've seen this like a dozen times. He makes some insane athletic play when he gets back, and is then out 2 months later. And guess what? It didn't even take 2 months. Not long after that highlight play, Zion was late to a team flight and got suspended by his team. And let's not forget, this happened right after he missed 27 games. How do you disrupt your team after already missing like 80% of the season?
You miss half the time that you've been in the NBA, and you think that's okay? You think you can force your way out by moping, by pouting, missing all this time, showing up late.
What's even more funny is that, after stalling and hindering the team's progress for years, nearly half a decade, and after they built the roster around Zion, he has the audacity to request a trade, claiming he doesn't want to be there anymore.
The New Orleans Pelicans are going through a major crisis right now. Their superstar player in Zion Williamson doesn't want to be in New Orleans anymore.
Anyway, a big reason things like this happen in the NBA is because of their contracts. NBA players are paid so much that there's barely any incentive left to consistently perform. Once the money is secured, for many, the hunger to compete fades. It's like Conor McGregor in the UFC. After his $100 million payday against Mayweather, he essentially sailed off into the sunset.
Did you think that $100 million changed Conor? Does he still have the desire to go train and punch people in the face and get kicked in the face like he did when he was broke?
It's impossible for that money not to affect you and phase you.
The reality in the NBA is that for many players, signing a massive contract feels like they've already won. And for players like Zion, the motivation to win games or chase championships often seems to disappear after that point. Every now and then, they'll put on a show to make it seem like they care, but the reality is staring us in the face. They just don't give a shit. This trend is damaging the league as a whole, but here's a potential solution to address this issue. What if only half a player's salary was guaranteed and the other half depended on performance, like making the playoffs, or was tied to a per-win basis, or some variation of that? Imagine how much harder NBA players and superstars would compete if every game had $100,000 or even $500,000 on the line. Would players compete harder on defense? Would players still load manage? Would players still keep launching threes? Would players like Zion commit to getting into the best shape possible to maximize his earnings? With a system like this, every game would come with built-in incentives, and as fans, we'd get a far more entertaining product. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying NBA players should be paid less. What they earn is their business, and I respect that. But the truth is, the current system creates an environment where there's little incentive for players to consistently put in effort, which is a real business issue at the end of the day. I mean, if no changes are made, more and more players will start to exploit the system, caring less about performance and ultimately dragging the league down. And when we look beyond Zion, it's clear that other superstars are already following the same pattern. In 2019, Ben Simmons signed a 5-year, $177 million contract as an All-Star and All-NBA talent. He was hyped as the next LeBron James, destined to win championships. But the harsh reality is that the contract itself became his championship, because ever since, he's practically disappeared. For example, despite years of media scrutiny over his lack of a jump shot, Ben Simmons has yet to develop a reliable mid-range game, an improvement that, given his size and skill set, could have made him one of the league's elite players. Instead, he's been content cashing in massive paychecks while spending significant time on the bench, occasionally making headlines more for his Willy Wonka-inspired outfits. Paul George is another example. After leaving the Clippers over contract issues, he signed a max deal with the Sixers, paying him $50 million a year at age 34. Since then, he's posted some of the worst stats of his career and seems to spend more time making podcasts than playing games.
They said Paul George got more podcast episodes than games played right now.
That's crazy.
That's OD.
That's crazy.
That should tell you everything.
Far too many players no longer care about winning, and it's painfully obvious when you hear their comments or take a closer look at some of the league's biggest stars. To be fair, not all players are like this. Some still show up every day, put in the work, and play their hearts out. Steph, Giannis, and Jokic are a few that immediately come to mind. But the truth is, those players seem to be in the minority, and the growing trend of players securing massive contracts and then coasting is becoming increasingly common, making the NBA less appealing to fans. If the league wants to restore its greatness and ramp up business, it must address and fix the loopholes that players like Zion and others are taking advantage of. On a different note, do you know who puts in more effort than 90% of the NBA? A 5'8" undrafted player fighting every game to keep his career alive. Honestly, he's electrifying, and I'd take watching him over half the league any day. If you're wondering why, check out this video where I break down just how extraordinary this player truly is.